Okay, is this going? Hope so. So I spent about, maybe 5-10 minutes setting this lighting system up so that I can record effectively in my brother's room, because anywhere else is pretty noisy at the moment, because we're getting they, as in my stepdad, is getting solar panels installed on the roof because he wants to save money on electricity. So, before going into this, I wanted to say that sorry if I have this beard going on. I have to be perfectly honest with you. The first reason why it's there is because, being at UC Berkeley, and I'll explain this later, caused me to just neglect everything except for school, pretty much. And so it's, I would just go without even disgustingly not taking a shower for a while, and then just taking a shower, because it's like it would actually start affecting my ability to just concentrate. So that is kind of disgusting, but it was, you got to do what you got to do if you're a student that's at a tough school. So especially at a tough school that really doesn't give a shit about hygiene, or doesn't give a shit about hygiene. Anyway, so what I wanted to explain in this video is basically an update to the video that you saw in the summer regarding during July 9th, regarding just whatever was going on within my life and what I was trying to accomplish, whatever I was trying to do at that point. It's almost always gonna have to do something with some kind of book or something mentally stimulating, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because once your work gets your mental work gets amplified, so to speak, then you see everything happen, and it's great. I haven't had the pleasure of that per se, but as long as you're some kind of intuitive person, or perhaps just somebody who just kind of sits there and projects in the future, it's almost as if it's there. Or because time is basically irrelevant to what you're trying to do in some ways. The only thing that really matters is that whatever you're doing actually is consistent, and is actually is logically going to produce something, or is propitious in some context. Anyway, this is going on a ramble. I'm sorry to say that. Let's get to the point. So, that's right. And the other reason why I have the beard is because of this. The freaking dog, the German Shepherd that we have, chewed this portion, and now I can't find the razor portion, and now I can't find it. Although the electronic portion, as you can tell, it's vibrating, still works, and you can see hopefully the motor thing is. You can see the motor thing turning. Forgot what it's called. Rotor, I guess you could call it a rotor. Right there, turning. It stops. Turning, stops. Anyway, so that would be the second reason why I haven't shaved. And it's been pissing me off, because I want to be able to just look clean, That's kind of what I'm about these days. Anyway, excuse me for that. I don't mean it to be something that is distracting from the video, because I'm going to have some interesting things to talk about aside from that. So please forgive me for looking unkempt. It's just how it is right now because of my situation. So anyway, I wanted to recap of I wanted to give a recap of what happened on July 9th, 2016. That was when I last recorded it, and I'll show you what I was trying to do. So first of all, I was telling you that one of my things I was working on was getting through this FE, right? Oh, by the way, before I explain that, I calculated it's been about 172 or 173 days since that time, and that's going to be relevant for what I'm going to explain. And that's already, July, August, September, October, November, December. So just for all practical purposes, that's six months. It's 173 days, just for all practical purposes. Anyway, so to recap on what happened, or what I was trying to do, let me show you what I was trying to do. So I was trying to get through this FE book, and you will be surprised because I think I was on like chapter 6, right? Now you might think, well, come on, you spent this so many days have gone by. How can you be on chapter? Let me see, what chapter am I on? Chapter 31. How can you be? That's because I diversify my time. I don't just focus on one thing. So that time that I spent on this might as well have been only a week. So anyway, so I'm on chapter, well actually, am I on chapter? I'm basically almost on chapter 32. I mean, I'm basically done with chapter 31. No, I am on a chapter 32. Or I could be, actually I might have skipped 32 because I already knew it or something. Oh no, I'm far beyond 32. I'm on chapter 34, whoops. For some reason, yeah, so chapter 34, am I? No. I don't even remember. Yeah, I'm in the middle of chapter 34, so that's actually better than I thought. So that's chapter 34, and it's on materials, concepts that I've never even seen before, having to do with flux, J, and stuff like that. Like, you know, J is representing flux. Anyway, so, and what I did for the FE is I used this. I used a book, and I was taking some notes only for the chapters I knew that I was really bad at, or had no idea about, which was the environmental portion. And I have to be honest with you, I still don't know much about it, but I have some nascent idea, some latent idea about how it all comes together, like BOD, which I had no idea what it was. It has to do with, you know, the concentration of, you know, biosolids, basically, bioorganic solids. So, without going into too much detail on that, or possibilities on that, so that was the first thing I was trying to do. One of the things I was trying to do. The other thing I was trying to do is I was trying to read. You guys remember this one. This was probably one of the more important things I was trying to get done. Is a Tony Robbins book, Money Master the Game. So I finished this a while back. It's got about 616 pages, and I read everything, mostly actually through the last third of the book. I read through just taking BART every day to school. I kind of stopped doing that because it was kind of interfering in some ways. Sorry about that. Let me get the camera going. Jesus. Anyway, so that was happening, but let me see. Hopefully that's stable. Anyway, to some extent. Anyway, so that was happening, and so yeah, I read this book, and when I have to give it a pretty good rating. I mean, obviously, should be giving it a good rating, a good 4 out of 5, because because it's been enough time for me to realize that it's not as good as it could have been. Partly because, but it's got its good parts, because for a beginner, they see everything all the options available to them at a very broad scale, and so you're able to kind of, it's a good introduction to finance for beginners like me. So I was happy to see all that. And then he mentions annuity. I feel like he should have annuities. I feel like he should have talked about that more in the beginning of his book. So that's one thing he kind of lacked on Tony Robbins, but because it's and then the other thing too is it's a little bit confusing about how to do all this stuff. So I do have to go back, and I think that's my fault. There's certain things about it where if you're going to visit Charles Schwab, how exactly do you and you get a account, how exactly do you connect your 401k? How exactly do these things work? How do you sign up for a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k? All these things are are out there, but how do you actually use it to the best of your advantage? And apparently, what's so great about this, or the information he's presenting, is that you could get a fiduciary through companies like Charles Schwab, I guess you could do that for Bank of America, but he was explaining that you could do it for like Charles Schwab that don't charge excessive fees because they're actually just trying to do it for the people using it in a more ethically inclined way. So if I was going to, so that's what I would do. If I was going to get a Charles Schwab account, I would ask them if I can get a fiduciary, and then the fiduciary would then give some recommendations on what to do about how to invest. And so that is a good idea. On the other hand, why would I need one? Well, if you already know about all the finance stuff, why would you need a fiduciary? Well, I think you would want a fiduciary because then they know they also can handle the investments themselves, so they might even be able to just hook you up with. I think this is the way you do the cheap investing, or what they call the low cost index funds. Is you do it through a fiduciary, through something like Charles Schwab, and I don't know if it's necessarily connected directly to your 401k, but see, all those details he didn't necessarily explain in a very cohesive manner. That's not necessarily a bad thing, entirely a bad thing, but it doesn't necessarily give you an exact way of what to do. You'll have to figure that out on your own. So I'm going to have to figure that out on my own, and I'm okay with that. So those are the kinds of questions I'm going to have to ask. Is I'm going to have to say, so hey, let me talk. So if I get a fiduciary, can they invest my money into low cost index funds? Is that how it works, or do I have to get something? Ask somebody else? Because if I have to get a broker to do that, it doesn't really make sense, because then they're just going to take your money, right? So. Yeah, he doesn't necessarily explain. You know, I could have missed it, but he didn't really explain it based on what I remember. I have to go back and see. But those are the kinds of questions after reading the book that just you know exactly what to do, because you know everything is finance related is then connected. You know, so it's not just about getting lucky, finding a mutual fund, because that's the easiest thing, right? To get a mutual fund, and then just believing that, and then thinking that somebody's so smart that you're gonna get a bunch of money out of just their decision making, which is not going to be the case. It's they say 80%, or at least 80% of mutual funds beat the market over a extended period of like 20-year period or something, maybe 90% even. So they don't really work as much as frequently as would be the case to give you a auspicious outcome. So anyway, I finished the book, which I'm happy about, because it ever since that time, 173 days, and it didn't take me that whole 173 days to read it, which is good to know, and I still got a lot out of it. So if you can read something and then still feel that you got a lot out of it and can talk about it a lot, obviously that means that you accomplished a lot. Anyway, so the next book I read is called God's Debris. So God's Debris, it's basically, I'm just going to spill the beans. It's by Scott Adams. It's about these two guys talking on their views of reality, and basically the other guy is saying that there's one guy saying that he believes the life is all about putting God's minute particles back together, and that the reason why life was created in the first place is because God's debris was, I guess you could say, promulgated or profused throughout the universe, and now it's just a matter of putting it back together. And so everybody's just motivated by this factor, is what what God's Debris is all about. And so it's kind of interesting. I would recommend it because it's very short. It took me about like 2 days, maybe 6 days to read, because I was only reading it for an hour a day. and I read it. And yeah, it took about 6 hours to read it. It's still short if you think about it. So it's only about 130 pages, and they're short pages too. It's like if you ever read Series of Unfortunate Events. It's a really short series like that, but it's still kind of longer than that. But anyway, so I finished that, which I'm happy about, and those things. And like I said, I still have to go through the FE and still have to take the FE, which could take a long time. But I am gonna go through a practice test before I take it to see how I did. Anyway, so the next big, this was a big thing that I did. It's called the GRE. Now the GRE, it's not as trivial as you might think of it as, because although it is trivial at the end of the day. I mean, once you take it, you don't want to take it again. Trust me. It's just a piece of shit test. It's junk. It doesn't mean anything unless you're in 8th grade and you're trying to learn to get to college. That's really all it's about. You know, if you're in 8th grade and you're trying to rush to get to become accredited based for college, then I would say that's good. It was good for them, because it's a pretty good indication for somebody. For a base score for somebody to get into college. They don't necessarily have to. They don't necessarily have to get a hell of a good score, but if there's a baseline for them to get it, then it automatically grants them the ability to just get into should be able to show that they're college ready automatically. Although it's funny, because the purpose of the GRE, I'll show you the book that I was using. Remember this book? The purpose of the GRE is to test to see if you're ready for graduate school, which is kind of stupid, because all the questions they ask you are basically geared for somebody just trying to get ready for college. But on the other hand, they're also, if you're testing it for that, they're hard questions. So that's why I think that it's good to test to see if you can get a baseline for whether or not you're just ready for college anyway. It's a better test for that. It's a terrible test for somebody like me who's saying, screw this little thing, screw that little thing. I can spend some time on it, but then you're telling me I have to do this in 2 minutes. You know, you're telling me to do this problem in 10 minutes. 2 minutes, I'll try my best, but I'm gonna get it wrong because it's gonna take me at least 3. You know, it's one of those kinds of things. So I could get a perfect score on both portions, the verbal and the quant, but because of the fact that they want you to answer every question in two minutes, and then sometimes if they're longer, they let you have. I mean, it makes more sense to spend 3 to 4 minutes, but at those small amounts of time, it's like you're basically just testing your ability to go freaking fast, if somebody is on concerta or not. And so I think that's a bad indication, a very terrible indication of getting into graduate school. Now, granted, it was still a pain in the ass because I had to study for the verbal portion because I didn't know any words. Now, I'm not saying that 8th graders should know these words. That's not what I'm saying. That if they were trying to get into college and they get a base and they were to prepare for this exam like they would for their for a semester long final, then and getting a base score from that would mean they're ready for college, is basically what I'm saying. So that's exactly what I did. And so, by that I mean to say not necessarily college as in a community college, I mean to say even a university level. So in some ways it's like the SAT, but on the other hand, it's unfairly the SAT because it's just testing your speed. So I would give this kind of test to people that are in 8th grade or whatever, and they're trying to go to a university straight out of junior high or early in high school. And I'm not even saying it's like the SAT where they have to graduate from high school. I'm saying it's one of those things where they're just trying to go straight to college. So, because what it does is it tests your ability, like I said, as if it's a whole semester, and you're trying to go through all this information and then finally taking a test and seeing how you did. Is basically what it's testing you on. And so now if you're already an expert at all this stuff, then you don't need preparation. So for example, for the math portion, I knew everything. It was like, integers, all that stuff. That was easy. And so I should have scored a perfect score, but remember they test you on how fast you can do it. So obviously I didn't. I got 157 if people are interested, but and I couldn't even answer some of the questions because they had you go so fast. Anyway, so but then on the verbal side, it was very similar to that, where I spent a whole semester just going through words that seemed very confusing, and then I got a base score of 152, which basically, if you combine the two, 309, that's good enough to get into many graduate school programs, and so I'm freaking happy about that. And you could see that a lot of the work that I put in. I spent hours just going through videos, and then also these are the flashcards these flashcards I use. These flashcards for the new definitions. Remember, I knew almost none of these words, so here's the chunk of the definitions. I think I showed it to you. This is the definitions for that first flashcard set. Now, I have two other flashcards sets that I mostly used and I didn't use. It's hard to explain what I mean by that. But so I used these flashcards and then also these flashcards. So those were all the flashcards I used, including the ones I just showed earlier. So these flashcards, basically these flashcards that I showed you earlier, they're 250 words in these, and these are all the base words, which worked out pretty well. And these essential words, I kind of went through them, just kind of looked at them and then saw the definition and flipped them over, and then didn't really memorize them, but I did get a good grasp on what they were. Just you could say what do they call that again? Where it's like you just feel it, visceral. There we go. So, and then for this one, I kind of did the same thing, but I was more concentrated on these words because the advanced words. I don't know why, but yeah, what I did was I took them and I went to the gym a lot, and I was just flipping through them while I was on the treadmill. Did that a lot. So there's also a lot of words I didn't necessarily memorize. I just kind of flipped through them. I was like, okay, yeah, let me see what this word is. Whenever I sat down and I didn't have anything else to do, I just would say, okay, let's go through this. Okay, yeah, okay. I've never seen that word before. But what I mostly did that was most successful in providing, a base score that's greater than or equal to 150 of the verbal section is I took a lot of random vocab notes and I just kept going through them. So let me count. There's so there's 17 pages of vocab stuff that I did, and was that flipped over? No. And there were just a bunch of notes of vocab words I didn't know that I saw on videos. It was either videos or just passages that I went through. So 17, it could have been anything like that, and I just wrote them down, even if it was sloppy. And sometimes what I would do is I would write down the vocab word that I didn't know, so that I can define them later in a notebook, and I'll show you the notebook. So this is what I mean by college readiness, because I'm saying that this is what you would do if you were taking a final, is you would just keep going through things in college. You would just keep going through the information, taking as many notes as you can. You know, this is generally what college students do, especially at the university. And you just keep doing it, and you're saying, okay, well, how do I? And then you review it over and over again until your brain explodes, and then finally, when the final's there, you take it and you see how you did. So this is why I think that the GRE is a bullshit when it comes to graduate school, because it's mostly about, and so I use this book, you know, for the passages, and so that's why I think the GRE is mostly bullshit for, in terms of not knowing something and studying for something to get into grad school, because this is what you do in college anyway. So, or what you should be doing in college anyway. And so it's only good for people who are in 8th grade trying to get to college, taking a test to get into college. And I would say only a base score should be the case. Because if you're timed, it's crazy. Anyway, so yeah, that's that. And I got 152, by the way, on the verbal section. So I don't know how I did on the writing. I don't want to see it. But I didn't even prepare for it, so I probably got 2 or 3 on it, because I did so out of 6, I think, is the highest you can go. So anyway, there's that. And then the other thing I wanted to show you, so here's the other thing related to GRE. So as I've told you, so what I did was I defined some of the words in those pages, like what I just showed you, and I would put them inside this notebook. And you know, there's some FE notes in here, but mostly it's definitions of words. So you see the definition, right? And so, you know, I actually surprisingly remember a lot of these definitions, and they're all complicated words. Some words that you would not use, and there's probably a word for that, which is probably vexing or confounding. Words that you would not use in just normal language. You could also say describe it as patois with respect to the GRE, because if you look up the definition of patois, then you would understand Patois. Anyway, so here's more definitions, and this notebook that I used went all the way up to, and I kind of had some journals in here, went all the way up to page 159. If you count the back page, which I did some math on, for some other purposes, then that's 160. So it's crazy, because then I had another notebook. See, I was thinking to myself, when do I stop studying, right? I didn't know. But I was just like, I'll just keep going, because I knew that I had to get a good score. I had to get some base score on it. So here's this one. So this one went up to page 8, although you don't see it. There's 8 pages of definitions. And this one just had definitions. So I also want to sort of thank this guy. His name is Chris Lele. Don't know if I'm saying that last name right, but he really helped me. His videos really helped me in getting all the definitions down. For some of the definitions I still don't know, like the ones that would start with dis. I always forget those. Anyway, so I actually did well enough to get into grad school, but I haven't actually applied to grad school yet, because fuck school right now, at least, you know. I'm like, at this point, I don't want to see another assignment again. So that's another point I'm going to bring up. And then I just recently graduated from UC Berkeley, and I spent quite a lot of time just trying to do well and stuff. And then I ended up with about a 2.75 GPA, which is good, because it was my GPA went from around 2.3, where it was for my first 2 semesters, 2.4, to this point. Means that it's a freaking good. I either got probably some A's and B pluses, you know, and that did happen. So anyway, here's some other things that I was going over in the summer, which is called The Intelligent Investor and Rich Dad's Guide to Investing, right? So these are actually pretty big books, and then obviously the other two books which I don't have on me. Hold on a second. I will find it. I might just tell you about it. Oh, here they are. Here's one of them. So here's one of them. How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big. Remember this book? Okay, so I finished that in the summer, and that was easy to read. And then the other book I finished was the Sammy Hagar book. I don't remember if I finished it back then, but I don't have it on me right now. But I did finish that book, and so but these two books I haven't even. I'm still trying to get through. Well, this one I put on the shelf because I think this book is more important. Remember what I told you? I said I would start reading this book. But it's funny that 173 days have passed by, and I'm still on this book. This is a pretty in-depth book, and it's kind of like the GRE where you have to be really you have to go really in depth on it. So anyway, and then this book I still have to read, which I don't know. It may take me a while, but then there's a few other books that I have yet to read that I want to read, so that I can just move ahead. But before I go into that, I want to explain. Now I know this is kind of going on and on, but I wanted to explain that. Hold on a second. I wanted to explain what's going on with my life right now. So I am very happy to say, like I just said before, that I've graduated from UC Berkeley in civil and environmental engineering with a civil and environmental engineering degree, Bachelor's of Science, with an emphasis in structures. So I was pretty much ready to graduate a semester before. I just ended up getting the degree later because of unit requirements. But now that said, I'm actually in the process of getting a job and trying to just move forward. I'm very sick and tired of doing these very small problems with solutions that may only exist in the professor's eyes. So there's that, and I'm also working on some other things. So for example, here's a list I came up with of things that I'm working on, and then I have yet to talk about the book. So the first thing is I'm trying to get a LinkedIn account going. Now I have one, but I just don't have any pictures yet. But once I have that going, I could just, everything should work out pretty well. And then I just start applying anywhere I see. So the other thing I wanted to explain is that, oh, that's right, I forgot to explain. So also within those 173 days, I went to Greece and Rome, and I lost 20 pounds. And part of that has to do with the fact of the culture. The other thing has to do with reading, Scott Adams' book. So if you're out there, I would highly recommend that book. I'm not saying it's going to make you lose 20 pounds like it did me, but I went from 213 to about, and I just say 20 pounds because maybe it wasn't 213, maybe it was more like 210, to about 186. So, well, right now because I gained a little bit of weight from the uncertainty involved with everything going on, I'm about 190 pounds, which is actually pretty good if you think about it. But anyway, so let's go along with my list. So I said, yeah, I'm gonna have to get a LinkedIn account going so that I can just start applying at jobs and people will just look at my profile. So because nowadays it doesn't necessarily work if you're in the engineering field. Just getting a random recommendation from somebody through a connection. I forget what the word is called. It's sort of like where you get the job because somebody knows you. I don't remember what the word is called, but it is mentioned a lot. But that process doesn't necessarily work for engineering. So what I have to do is, if I get a LinkedIn account going, then the chances of somebody looking at my profile due to all those connections and saying,
oh look, I want to message this guy because it's more merit based. So they say, oh, you went to Berkeley. I see. I'm gonna message this guy because I want to get him in my company. You see what I'm saying? So as soon as that ends up happening, then as soon as I get it going, then it seems more suitable to move ahead, posit. So anyway, the next thing I want to say is, yeah, and so as a result, I need to perfect my resume. So far, it actually looks decent. It's just that the problem with the resume is that I need to update it because some of those things I said don't apply to now. Such as the classes. I need to talk about how I took the advanced structural mechanics class, or advanced structural analysis, because that people look at that and say, this guy is fucking ready. This guy has everything. He's gone into everything he's needed to do, and we're gonna take this guy. Anyway, so there's that, which it shouldn't take that long. But as a result, I could send it to my friend Alan Peck, who claims that his company is going to take in more graduating engineers and people that are looking. So, and so it's good that I raised my GPA too, because if he says, "What's your GPA?" 2.75, then he's going to say, "Oh, well, that's kind of close to a 3.0, but you went to Berkeley, so okay, let's just see what you get. What other skills do you have?" So, okay, so there's that. Okay, there's another thing that I have to mention on here that I haven't mentioned because it's because it just seems very random. Anyway, so the next thing that's going on is that I have this refrigerator idea in which I don't really want to say much about it because other people might pick up on it, but basically it's meant for you to look at the refrigerator and say, "Oh, cool, look at this," and give you ideas of what to do. So it's meant for you to say, rather than just go to the refrigerator, you could actually go to the refrigerator, select a few things on this computer device sort of looking thing, and just say, okay, yeah, now this refrigerator's telling me that I can cook this thing. This refrigerator's telling me that I can, that is giving me recommendations of what to do. And as a result, it's gonna make my life better because instead of trying to figure that out myself, the refrigerator's doing it for me. And so that I have that idea of sort of making the device do that, and in some ways it's an invention, but in some other way, in other ways it's not. But no, it really you can define it that way because what's typically not an invention that you would think about as a practical use is something that already exists. It's combining two things that already exist. So the refrigerator already exists, but the device that you would augment to do these sorts of things doesn't. So it's by definition an invention. So that would be cool. Anyway, the next thing that I'm trying to do is I have about 300 notes in this phone that I haven't even compressed. It's all they're all there, and I want to be able to put them somewhere that seems more easily compressed and more easily, and then also more compartmentalized, because they're all kind of over the place, but they're ideas that I had of things that are actually doable. So I want to be able to do that, but they may not be possible because it could take so long just to get all those notes. But we'll see. It's to put it in basically a document in the computer. So we'll see how that works. The other thing too is I just got signed up for the 24-hour fitness gym, and I'm thinking about going every day. Or most days. So we'll see how that works. Now I'm not trying to lose weight. So anyway. And then the other thing I'm trying to do is something called currency trading. Now, you might say, well, why the hell are you doing that? Like, if you're going to make so much money, why would you do something, right? Well, because the reason is because my level of income the money I have already is so low that there's nothing else I can do if I want to invest right away. If I want to invest in stocks, my money is just going to be eaten away right away. Now, how do I put it? How do I put it this way? I don't mean to say it's going to be eaten right away, but by that I mean to say that it's not as yielding, because if I buy these stocks that are discretized in big ass chunks, then it's not diversifying. It's not diversifying the way you want it to. Instead, if you were gonna buy something that's cheap, stock related, there's gonna be a broker that is just basically trying to take your money, because the range is basically something very small and something that rich people would purchase that you wouldn't even be able to buy a share out of if you're a poor person like me. You see what I'm saying? So, but with currency trading, it's relatively small. It's when you're doing currency trading, it's relatively small. It's like the range is small. So it's, from what I understand, so it's mostly meant for people that are poor, like that don't have a good high level of savings. So yeah, there's that, and I'm gonna start doing that soon. Anyway, and then the next thing I'm gonna do is I have to prepare for the FE, like I should just show you the FE, right? So I have to prepare for that more, and which is just gonna entail taking the practice test, finishing that book, just reading it, maybe underlining things here and there, and then taking a practice test and see how I do. And then after that, if I screw up, I'm gonna have to get the other notebook that has practice problems, and I'm just gonna have to go through them. So anyway, okay, the next thing on my list that I didn't show is that I have this potential to get a foreign girlfriend. Yeah, I mean, who has that chance, right? Well, I'm one of the I do. So anyway, my friend actually went through the trouble of spending hours on OkCupid and finally got a girlfriend who lived back then in not Thailand, Indonesia. And then they had a baby. She came over and they had a baby and everything like that. But for me, see, you can't just live your life like alone all the time. You're gonna feel like shit all the time. So there's this girl that I'm considering. She's actually a really nice person. I mean, obviously she looks good. She's somebody I can probably talk to, because, like, you know, just whatever. The only thing I see a problem with is that she's religious, and that might conflict with how I take care of business in actuality. So that shouldn't be that bad, but I have my own method of handling these things. But anyway, so there's that. I'm really happy about that. So she's Filipina, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, I mean, whole shit, like, yeah, I mean, if I took her out over here, she would have guys crawling all over her. I mean, Jesus Christ, she's such a, you know, I don't know. Yeah, she's like really good looking, and I would, you know, I don't want to go into too much detail. Anyway, so there's that, and so everything's working out pretty well, except for there's a few things I'm trying to work on now. And I already told you about one of them. Actually, I put a 5-page report together for the refrigerator so that everything might be able to work out. Anyway, here's the books that I'm trying to read right now, because whatever the case might be. First book I'm reading is called Song of Susanna by Stephen King. It's Dark Tower 6. And remember, I don't think I told you, but when I was in Greece, I read Dark Tower 5. So I've been reading this Dark Tower series since I was 15, and I still haven't finished it. So I think it's funny, but I'm on page 118 of this book out of 500 pages, 540 pages, or 550. So, or 540. So I'm getting through it, but it's kind of slow. And then the other book I want to read afterwards is called The Dark Tower 7. It's the last book of the series. and yeah, it's gonna be pretty crazy. I hear. It's already kind of wild in book 6, but I'm really enjoying the series. It's just for me, it's so hard to put to to sort of go from this to technical stuff, because the technical stuff requires you to just go like see something for what it is. This is the opposite. It makes you curious about possibilities that may not have any real implication at all. It's like, what do you mean? A cave that you go through takes you to another world. How does that work? There doesn't seem to be any realistic criteria for that. But anything else I do, there is a realistic criteria. So you have to, when I'm reading all this stuff, I'm like, I kind of have to pretend like I'm listening to a crazy guy talk, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's a different mechanism that goes on in your brain when you're reading this, so it challenges you in some ways. So anyway, so yeah, these are the 2 books I want to read, which could take some time. Anyway, the other book I'm trying to read, obviously the other books that I wanted to read, and I showed you earlier, that I didn't get to read in the summer, is The Intelligent Investor and Rich Dad's Guide to Investing. So those, I don't know if I'm gonna get around to reading the Rich Dad book, but I definitely want to read The Intelligent Investor. So we'll see how that works. But the other books I'm trying to read are Influence by Robert Cialdini, because this is basically, if you read the book How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big, this is a very, very good continuation of something if you wanted to go more in depth on what Scott Adams is talking about, because it explains the mechanisms of everything that goes on in any interaction. For example, yesterday there was this really blonde, gorgeous woman. I mean, Jesus Christ. I wanted to take her, pants off and like just. I don't want to go into detail. Anyway, she was this gorgeous blonde chick who wanted to know everything about me right away and wanted to I told her, it was kind of a mistake, but I told her that I was doing engineering. I graduated from Berkeley, and she's also a student apparently. She's about 22 or 23, about my age. She wanted me to, she even gave me her number. And I'm thinking, in the Scott Adams perspective, this is like persuasion at its peak, because if she's just trying to get me to get gym membership and to keep going into, because I told her I didn't want to do something, if she's trying to get me to do all this stuff, which is, the 10th degree crap, and then all this, sign for all this other stuff, there is no better way to try to pull someone in, especially when my hormones are crazy, and especially when it creates a lot of reciprocity as a result. In other words, it's like, well, you would feel bad for not doing it. So that would be a good example of something to read upon before you just jump into the pool of persuasion, because then you may not even see it, and you may not even know what to do as a result. In fact, I'm emotionally stirred by this. I mean, holy shit. She was a good-looking woman. I mean, man, you could tear her shirt apart and, like, go doggy style. I mean, it's sorry to sound kind of perverted, but, I mean, it's true. Anyway, there's that. I got to get myself away from these thoughts. Anyway, but that just shows you the power of persuasion. It's not just about about the fact that it's not just the looks alone that will get somebody whatever they wanted. So if you said that every girl gets what they wanted just because of the looks, you're probably leaving out the persuasion side of it. And the persuasion side of it, you can sort of figure it out on your own. So in some way you could say, well, yeah, just based on a woman's looks, they somehow get it. But if you just disregard the persuasion itself, you're disregarding all the introverted women, all the shy women who just can't get it, can't use their looks because they're too insecure about it, can't learn the persuasion tactics on their own. So not to defend feminism, but I'm just saying that persuasion can be used on both sides. So you could be a guy and still get a hefty amount of benefits from using persuasion that even a woman couldn't do. Anyway, so here's the next book I'm trying to read, which is called Why Buildings Stand Up. I kind of already know why. I'm just curious what this guy has to say. His name is Mario Salvadori. And I admire him for his work so far from what I'm reading in his book, because he is civil engineer / architect / structural engineer. He, from what I understand, he's pretty versatile in what he does in his designs. Very similar to Luigi. I think his name is Luigi Pier-Nervi, who's best known for using mesh reinforcement in boats that are basically have like this very, very thin layer of concrete, overall maybe 2.5 inches, very thin, and it goes all along so that, it may only be, I think the reinforcing is 0.5 inches. I would have to look it up, but he goes, both men are very, they deserve praise for their work, but in particular, Luigi Nervi, which I think I showed you the book. Oh, wait, I don't think I showed you. I also read another book called Structures by Luigi Nervi, Luigi Pier-Nervi. And it's kind of the same thing as Why Buildings Stand Up, but it goes into detail of his work in particular. He doesn't necessarily say, okay, let's go and kumbaya. Like, this book is kind of a kumbaya book, where you're just kind of like, oh yeah, why don't we take a look at all these monumental things? But Luigi Nervi, I have to be honest, Luigi Nervi so far, I have a preference for him over Salvadori's literature, just because he goes over his own work and in detail and talks about what he recommends as far as the engineering goes. But this is in the 50s. This guy, the Kumbaya guy, is from the 80s. So, but Luigi Nervi, what he did was, so like I said, he did the boat, the naval construction, and he also did meshing for rooftops. So you could sort of see indulations of indulated beams, so that you can have more spacing for HVAC systems. And he also did the design of meshing that essentially had to do with layers of thickness that look like beams, but are maybe they're not beams. But it actually is architecturally pleasing and structurally pleasing, because of the way the meshing works to to transfer all the tension and compression. He goes into detail about it a lot, but I think it's particularly the fact that the meshes themselves create these joint locations that would prevent cracking to begin with. Because if you have only one set of reinforcement, then you're not preventing cracking. You're not preventing temperature and shrinkage effects. Because remember, I don't know if you know this, but the concrete is very heterogeneous, and also there's a lot of indeterminacy involved, so you could have those effects, and thus you would want to have meshing. And if you took an RC design course, you would kind of have an intuition for that, because you have to design for the transverse reinforcement to do that, even if it's not designed for bending. But anyway, so he goes into detail on that, and he shows his design work, particularly the one involving, like I said, the naval construction, and and it's mainly about the roofing involved with storing planes. And so one of his structures actually got destroyed over a war because, and I think so. But that's just the way it's going to be if things like that happen. But I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but it's like it's basically where you store your artillery and all the planes or whatever, anything that has to do with air, or it could even be tanks that have to do with it's basically to protect them. So and so it could also be like tanks, in the war, or just a plane for airplane flights. I kind of forgot what they call them in general at this point. If I looked it up, I could tell you what it's called, but at this point I forgot what they're called. In general, they're like these. If you saw them, you would. I mean, if I told you the word, you would see it. But anyways, thanks for watching.